We've got a great guest for you today, Victor Lazarte, co-founder of Wildlife Studios and partner at Benchmark Capital. Let's listen. Victor, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so for you guys that don't know, Victor is the founder of Wildlife Studios, which is one of the largest mobile gaming companies in the world. I think over 1 billion people have played your games, right?
Yeah,
and then
close to 2 billion.
Close to 2 billion, wow, that's even more. And he now is a partner at Benchmark. Everyone says, went to the dark side of investors.
I heard this so many times.
Yeah, and more than that, we're also friends for now 12 years or something like that. So I'm really excited to have you here because I'm going to get to ask you all the embarrassing questions that only I know.
I hope they're not too embarrassing.
Exactly. I was thinking about it and I was remembering like the first time that we met. I was 16 or 17.
We went for chicken.
We went for chicken in São Paulo.
Yeah.
For context, Victor and I are both Brazilian. And I remember you were very cagey about what you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why was that, you think?
I think it's kind of like two things. One is just my personality. Like I was never like a fan of the spotlight. But like on top of that, when I started Wildlife, I had a couple of really bad experiences like with investors. So my brother and I, we started in 2011, and we tried to raise a seed round, and everyone turned us down, which was fine. And the best term sheet we got was $50,000 for half the company. We turned that down. But then as the company worked and the first game started getting downloads and we had revenue, the app stores are very transparent, right? So those are mobile games, and you can know exactly how much money a mobile gaming company is making. So everyone knew this company is doing really well, and a bunch of investors started reaching out to us, and we're yeah, let's engage with these people. They seem super smart. So one of the leading venture firms in Brazil reached out to us, and then we went to their offices. We explained their business. We shared financials. We shared everything, and shortly after, the partner that took all those meetings started a competing company. And so it was kind of an incubation. So the firm never gave us a term sheet, and they just say, hey, thank you very much. This business sounds amazing. It didn't tell us anything, but a few months later, we saw some apps in the App Store, and even the name was very similar to the names of our apps.
Oh wow, so full copy.
Full copy. And but those things are funny because dumb people copy the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the world found a way to make justice, and that company obviously never went anywhere. But that was the first really negative experience that we had with investors. And then a couple months later, another prominent venture investor in Brazil reached out, and again we engaged with them, very impressive person. And then this guy gave us a term sheet. And by that time, the company was profitable. We were I think we're generating $6 million a year in profits. And he wanted to invest at a $10 million valuation. And so he wanted 10% of the company. And so we're very profitable, and we're paying dividends. We're paying dividends every month. And so he wanted to buy 10% of the company for $1 million on a preferred security, which means that he would make the investment, and 2 months later, he would get all the money back, and he would be left with 10% of the business. And my brother and I were this is theft, right? And of course, the venture scene in Brazil changed a lot, but this is 2012, and those are some of the best investors out there. And oh shit, these people are crooks. And every time we spend time talking to people outside of the business, we just find these people that are not helpful, that want to take advantage of us, and we get distracted from the business. So I think these two things combined, the combined lesson for this experience were hey, just be heads down, focus on your business, just don't engage with the outside world. So when I met you, there was this entrepreneur that introduced us, this is kids, they're super interesting, go meet them. And I was yeah, sure, let's go meet this smart kids. But I saw no advantage in explaining my business to you or anything like that.
Yeah. And do you think that was first time, like when this investor kind of copied you, that you got screwed in your life like that like someone like, blatantly like broke your trust like that?
Well, I was screwed before, but not business wise, because like before that, like I had nothing. So like people couldn't screw me out of money because I had no money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like all of us, like we all have to like endure the betrayal, like false friends at one point in life. And I think with me, like it was no different. But like from on a professional context, like that was the first time that I was like, oh,
Is there any story like that comes to mind from like early your childhood or teenage years that like kind of sparked that feeling for the first time?
I don't know if there's anything that is like super interesting, but when I was in college, there was this, I had this very close friend who like I admired very much. And he had come from like a very humble background. And like, I'm a sucker for people that overcome adversity. And so this guy, so I went to college in Paris, and this guy went to Paris with me, and he was less polished, but he was like super smart, and he was a hustler, and then when it was time for like people to graduate and like try to get jobs, like I was spending a lot of time with him, and I was telling him, hey man, like you can do anything you want, like like you're the most impressive person here. And so I was helping him like find a job and like get a job. And then like I was just so frustrated because like the minute he got the job, he just like immediately like stopped responding to me.
What job was it that
He wanted to like be an investment banker in London.
Okay.
So and then like we're spending all this time together, and like immediately after that, like he got the job. He stopped being like responding to me, and a few months later, he started dating this girl that I had a huge crush on. Yeah.
Oh my god.
I was like, oh man, that sucks. But
that does suck.
yeah, that's life.
But it is something I think I noticed about you, like from pretty early on. You're like, even though we met, you didn't tell me too much about your business. You're like very down to help me, and like give me advice, and you seem to help this guy. Like, where do you think it came from? Like that you just wanted to like help these young hustling kids, Which fits very well with your new job right now. But
it does, right?
Yeah. But like, where do you think it kind of comes from?
I think I love being around like really smart people, and I really pride myself on seeing talents before other people do.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So the thing that I love most is like there's this person who's like, hey, like there's huge potential here. And it's even more interesting when other people don't think there is. Like people that are slightly controversial. Mm-hmm. Honestly, like I remember so vividly our first lunch, like you were 16, like you and Pedro. And I was like, fuck, man, this kid is so special. It's like, you're 16, and like I've never in my life, I've seen a 16-year-old talk like that. And like, this is gonna be a super interesting ride. Like I remember having this vivid feeling. And then when you meet someone like that, it's this feeling of like, oh, there's this secret hidden in plain sight. It's like, by that time, like you knew a bunch of people and like people knew you, but like, I was like, I'm sure, like, we can never be sure, but
yeah.
I was like, to the extent that you're gonna be sure, it's like, hey, I'm sure this is gonna be so interesting. And part of it is like, you also wanna prove yourself right. So then I was like, hey, like, I'll do anything I can to like help you succeed. Because part of it is like, hey, like, I wanna show everyone that I was right.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely relate to that feeling too, of like, obviously, I remember, we had this like very instant chemistry, and obviously we've been very close friends since then. And I sent you this email saying like, I know we just met, but if you were gonna do like great things together.
Yeah, like I remember reading that email.
What did you think when you read that email?
Man, I was like, this guy's so full of shit. It's like 16-year-old, like it's almost like, okay, you read a sales book,
yeah,
and then like you see like all this obvious tactics, and like he's using all of them, but the crazy thing is like it works. It's like, okay, you're 16, like you're obviously, it's like, okay, like I'm kind of like ahead of you in your journey, like you're obviously like, hey, like trying to learn something. And like you're saying these things like, oh, like we're gonna do great things together. It's like, dude, like what
I think you are, right?
You're 16, man. Like we're not gonna do anything together, but yeah, like we're gonna hang out. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I'll take you to dinner.
Yeah,
a couple more times.
Yeah. So
that's so funny.
But I was like, but even that, you're like, it's just like, okay, like you're obviously doing the right thing to like engage with smart people. And I think if you meet like a 25-year-old that is saying that, you're like, yeah, whatever, But a 16-year-old that like realized that, like that's it's just very endearing,
Yeah, no, I remember I was very shameless at the time, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
at the time,
You know, I'm trying to get more back to it. You know, like you have more to lose. You start kind of like being like more guarded and stuff like that. And you know, I'm actually trying to go more towards my 16-year-old self. But going back to you, so one of the things that I thought was most interesting about your journey was, you know, because of maybe these experiences that you have, you're so guarded, like you didn't get like too many people to help you early on, right? Like you guys did like
Yeah.
so much like by yourself.
yeah,
You know, the thing that I found was crazy impressive looking back is like, you know, you got to like 6 million of profit in the first year, and like, who were you talking to? Like, you weren't even like, you're getting screwed by Brazilian VCs. Like, how did you like learn and get advice and like kind of grow without opening up?
oh, the internet is this wonderful place.
What did you read? Like, what was your like internet place that you would went to like do stuff?
And it's nothing special. It's just like when my brother and I decided to start like a mobile gaming company, like the first order of business is we went to YouTube and we typed how to make a mobile game, right? And then I was obsessed, and even I think just Google was like, okay, we're gonna start a company. Like we literally Googled, like, what should you do when you start a company? And then it's like, oh, like you should raise a seed round. And like we tried to do that, like that didn't work. But the tutorial that we found on YouTube, that was a pretty good tutorial. We literally, like our first game was literally like we saw this tutorial, like we made that game and like we put it online. And of course it didn't work, but we learned so much. But then the thing, like I was obsessed with like biographies, and like I was obsessed with like understanding the lives. I still am, like understanding the lives of like people that did super interesting things. So I spent like a million hours like looking at, so first like reading the biographies like, I don't know, Elon Musk and like Bill Gates and like Steve Jobs and whatever. And like after you're done with all of that, it's like, okay, what are all the books that these people recommend? So like I've spent so much time just like trying to understand, okay, like what are the favorite books of like all these people? What are the books that influence them? And then like reading all these books. And to be honest, like I'm not recommending that people do that. It's just like a waste of time. If you can talk to someone that has built something, like that is just, that's the way you do it, which is just insanely more effective. But yeah, so like we bootstrapped the business, and like we didn't have.
Isn't it crazy that that guy that created that YouTube video about how to make mobile games had like an impact on like building this multi-billion-dollar company, and he probably doesn't even know it?
No, but even crazier, even crazier is like, okay, so the total outside investment in the company, like in the first 9 years, was just like $100, and the $100 was like the Apple developer program was $50. They had to pay $50 to like get that.
Yeah.
And then the other $50 that we spent is when you're making a mobile game, like the icon is very important, because like if you have a good icon, like you have like very high conversion, and you have a kind of high conversion, like you go up the charts, and like this is a positive feedback loop. So it's like, okay, like we gotta make it very good, and because the team was just my brother and I, we're the programmers, game designers, we did everything, so the games didn't look that good. And then we said, okay, like the icon is really important. So like, okay, like this is like a great icon. So let's invest. So like half of the company's budget was on the icon. So we spent $50. So we went online, like we found like this designer marketplace, spent $50. Like the guy made a great icon. It was this like cute penguin. And then like when the company took off, and that game ended up like making like tens of millions of dollars, we reached out to the guy. Because we were like, you know, like the team was like my brother and I, but we're like, oh, you know, like that guy's kind of part of the team, you know? So like, let's reach out to him. Like, let's tell him that like his icon has like crushed it. And so over 100 million people, like over its lifetime, like over 100 million people played that game.
Saw the icon.
Yeah, and saw the icon.
This is Racing Penguin?
This is Racing Penguin.
Yeah.
And, you know, over 100 million people downloaded the game. So way more than that, like saw the icon.
Yeah.
Like, so we reached out to the guy. And it's like, hey, like, you know, like that icon that we bought from you, it's for this game, and this game like ripped. And the guy's like, yeah, whatever, guys. Like, just stop like making shit up. Like, do you want me to like do another icon for you? It's like, no, dude, like, we're serious. So after a while, like
Okay, we'll make our. That's so crazy. And so, tell me, like, when you were growing up, did you like game at all or no?
I did.
Yeah. What were your like kind of growing up games?
Growing up, like I loved games. But the rest, like I loved like I loved puzzles, and like so growing up, like a big passion of mine was just math, and like I was like doing math Olympiads, and I was like puzzles like that. I always enjoyed making games more than playing games. But then there's a few games that really like marked my childhood, and I think the biggest example is Age of Empires.
Oh, that was really good.
The Age of Empires was so good.
I like the Age of Mythology too. That was really good too.
Yeah, you're younger, man. I like Age of Empires 2. That game is just so well done. You know, like it has the lore, and like the strategy is super deep.
Yeah.
And like the multiplayer components, like it's a very complete game.
So did your parents, when you were gaming, did they think it would like amount to anything productive or no? Were they like upset that you were gaming or not either even?
That's, I love my parents. They've done so many correct things, but one thing that they did that like it hurts me is like I didn't have a computer. So growing up, my brother had a computer, and like I was not allowed to use the computer. So I could use the computer. I don't know, man. It's like, two boys, we're competitive, and then like I had my things, he had his things, and then I was allowed to like use the computer for an hour a day. And so I couldn't play a lot, and like I couldn't like browse the internet a lot. Yeah. I think I got my first computer when I was probably like 14, 15. Yeah.
And then like at this point, right, like what was your kind of motivation? Like you're doing these math Olympiads, you're doing well in them. Like what did you feel was your motivation to do all this? You just like wanted to win, you wanted to make money, you wanted to like get into good college. Like what was going through your head, you think, at that time?
When I started the company? Or?
No. Back like when you were like 14, 15, kind of.
Yeah. So it was this weird dynamic because like my dad comes from Argentina, and there's like a military government in Argentina that murdered one of his closest friends, and then like they tried to get him. So he had to like flee the country, and he moved to Brazil. And because he had this like experience of like a repressive government, he was just very distrusting of authority. And I don't know if it's true or not, but in his head, like the U.S. government had something to do with it, military governments in Argentina.
But we definitely learned that in school in Brazil, right? Like that, like the U.S. government was like.
Given how important this is for my personal story, like I feel like I should investigate this more. But I actually don't know. I don't know if the U.S. had anything to do with it or not. But the way it affects me is like my dad is kind of like anti-capitalist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was like, Americans, they're very capitalist, and like that's kind of evil. And then my mom was like super poor. Like my mom, she came from like the northeast of Brazil, and her dad was murdered when she was like 3. And she has like 10 siblings. And so she was just a really rough childhood. And then I think like in our household, there was a little bit, there's like some like resentment like towards like rich people. And I think it's kind of common in Brazil.
Yeah, I was just it's kind of similar in my household.
In what way?
Like there was a lot of like anti-American kind of thing, like making money is like not that important, and like important is like stability and studying and stuff like that. Like I feel like in the US the parents are like very pro-capitalism.
Yeah, and I think in Brazil there's this thing where a lot of the people that have a lot of money, like they're corrupt. Like,
yeah, there's the thing. If you made a lot of money, you probably did something wrong, right? Like that's what you tell. You probably stole from someone. You probably screwed someone over.
So there's like very much this mentality.
You know what my dad used to say? That if I worked too hard, then like my wife would cheat on me.
That's awesome. But true, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's awesome. What a lesson. Yeah, and my parents, like, they had this negative, like, they used to make fun of, like, oh, yeah, these Americans, like, with all their money. And it's like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And so growing up, like, there's this weird thing that I always loved knowing the price of everything.
Oh, interesting.
I was just obsessed. Like when I was a young kid, like, I was very good with numbers. And so I would love to, I used to buy this car magazines. In this car magazine, like they had all the car models.
And the prices per model.
The prices.
What was your like car that you wanted when you're like looking at this, or you didn't really care?
I didn't really care. My thing was just like I wanted to know the price of every single car, and it's weird because like even like today, like I love knowing the price of things, you know, even if it's not practical. So then like my parents found it super funny, and like they would go to the neighbors and say, hey, like ask the price of any car to my kid, and he'll tell you. And like I was able to tell because I memorized the entire thing. It was like hundreds of cars. So yeah, so it's this weird thing where it's like, oh, you know, like I thought that business was something that was interesting, and I was curious about it, but somehow like I was made feel wrong about being interested in those things. But then like I think the other super important thing is like there's a lot of violence, you know, like where I grew up, and you know, like there was never like any violence committed against me. You know, like I was robbed at gunpoint, but nothing serious, you know. But like around me, like
it's funny that in Brazil, like this is nothing serious. You know,
Yeah.
when we grew up, you're like, I robbed at gunpoint. Yeah, nothing that
so
serious.
you were
know?
robbed at gunpoint.
Yeah, 100%. But like you know, in the US, you're like, I robbed at gunpoint. Like, what?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Like,
Yeah. So so my brother was kidnapped. My grandfather was like murdered, and there was like even more traumatizing experiences like growing up. I remember this time I was probably like 8 or 9, and my neighbor. So we lived in this small street. Like there was like a gated street, and then like there was a robber that he broke in and like he committed an act of violence against my neighbor that she never like recovered from. And like I remember so vividly like that night. It was like a kind of like a close community. Like people spend time with each other. So I remember like all the dads of the street, like they got together. It was just weird. It was like they were doing this thing. Like I didn't know what was going on, and they were all tense. Like they all got in their cars and like got away. And I asked my mom, "Is like what's going on?" And my mom told me like, it's like, so all the males they got together, and they're looking for the person that was here, and they're gonna try to kill them.
wow.
And I was like, what? And I was just so young, you know?
Yeah.
But like, that was like so scary to me.
And like, what do you think was the feeling that like that evoked you that like you know stuck with you? How did it like impact you as like?
So that was an experience. And then like, when my brother was kidnapped, it was another like scary experience. Like there's a couple of other experiences that were kind of like that made me feel like, you know, like the world's a very violent place. And then I felt like, man, like I don't want to be like one day I'm gonna have a family, and like I just want to be like shielded from all this, and I felt like, okay, I was very afraid of being poor. Like I was very afraid of being poor because I felt like, oh, like if I'm poor, then I'm gonna be vulnerable to all these things. So I felt it was very important to be in control and in command of your life, and control your surroundings. Like I felt like all these things were like super important. And so I think that was a motivation. And
Yeah,
then
totally.
like I wasn't able to articulate, you know, I wish I had spent more time online and like understood more how things worked. But I wasn't able to articulate, oh, like I need to have a company and this and that. But like I wanted to like own my destiny, right?
And like in that time, like what was the path that you imagined of like owning your destiny? Like what was the little story that you said like I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that? Did you plan ahead like that?
I wish I had done it better. But you know, like I remember like the story of my grandmother, and like my grandmother was like, she had 10 kids, and like she hadn't studied, but she was like very hardworking, and like she gave her kids kind of like a chance, and then the thing that she told our kids, including my mom, is like, hey, like you got to study very hard, and like the answer to everything is like study. And then my mom, she went on to like become a doctor, and my life was like radically better than her life. And then in my head, it's like, okay,
Studying is the tool.
yes, studying is the tool.
Yeah.
Like studying is the key, and like when you don't know the answer, like the answer is
Study.
always study.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I feel there's like a whole generation for like that. This was like true, right? Like this seemed to be even in the U.S. Studying was like the way of social mobility, right? And it still
Yeah.
is, I guess, to some extent.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are other ways.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure there are other ways.
Yeah.
But like I guess For me, like I always heard that growing up too. Is like studying was the.
So I think the world was a much less efficient place. Because I think like now with the internet, like you just go online and like you probably ask ChatGPT, like for example, if
and you see a lot of stories of people who've done it in other ways, right?
Yeah.
Like, but growing up, you didn't have that.
Yeah.
You just didn't know, right? Like,
I didn't know anything, you know. So I think the path was like, hey, you study hard, you go to a very good university, and from there, like you get a very good job, and you work really hard, and one day, God knows what.
Yeah.
Right. And then. So then like I became like, so I got into this engineering program in Brazil. And then I was like, oh, okay, like I should go to a grade school. And I was like, oh, I should go to the US. Like I should go study in the US because like best schools in the world are in the US.
That was clear to you at that point?
It wasn't super clear. And then my dad was like, no, you shouldn't go to the US. I was like, what? I was like, oh, the US is like too expensive. Like we don't have the money to pay for it. And plus like, you shouldn't do that. Like maybe you go do like your master's degree. And so in his head is like, oh, you got to do a PhD. Like, you got to do a PhD. PhDs are great. And then, you know, like the like college, you should be here. But then like to do PhD, like you go to the US. I was like, oh, okay. But then like I found out that the French government like had this scholarship program. And so if you got into a good Brazilian university and you did really well, like the French government would like sponsor you, like send you to like this grade school and pay for everything. So I got into like a great engineering program in Brazil and I was ranked #1 on that program. And that got me like the scholarship to go to France.
And like before, you know, and I'm very curious about your French chapter, but before we go there, like what was like Victor like in high school and college? Were you popular? Were you good with girls? Were you like very nerdy? Were you like kind of like in between? You know, like what was like Victor, you know, if like you asked someone from like your high school, how would they describe you?
I went to like an academic high school and like I was like super lucky because like that was an unlock to go to this very good, like the best engineering program in Brazil. So in both of these places, like it was like nerdy places. So it was a place where like being a nerd
was cool.
It wasn't cool, but it wasn't uncool.
Got it.
I was like very rebellious. Like I was always like very rebellious. And I think part of that comes from my dad. Like he always incentivizes like fuck authority, you know, like governments suck and like companies suck. Companies suck. Like I did really well, but like I didn't fit the mold of like.
How did it manifest in high school, like your rebellion?
You know,
Would you like you sent out to the principals?
That's the part that I'm ashamed. But the thing that I enjoyed a lot is like when teachers made a mistake. I just loved correcting them so much. and they would get pissed off. So I'd like correct them in front of the class. And
then they would not be happy.
They'll not be happy. And then like they would pick on me and then I would pick on them.
Yeah.
And then like I was always like a social person. So I love to like, if I knew the subject, I would love to like talk to my friends during class. And then so my high school wanted to expel me because like I got into like, I had like the small conflicts, like never like anything big, but I had this like small conflicts of like enough teachers. So they wanted to expel me. And then, but this high school, like they marketed themselves as like the high school that got, so in Brazil.
It's the best university, right? If you go here, you're gonna get into the best university.
Yeah, but even more so, like in Brazil, like there's a ranking. So the way you get to college is like there's a test. You do the test, and like there's a ranking, and like it's very public. And like the school is like, oh, like every year the #1 person that gets into university comes from our school. The #1 in the rank, and like we have like 3 of the top 10 or something like that.
Yep.
And then like I was there's a very high likelihood that I was going to be on the top 10. And my brother was also in the same high school. Like there was also a very high likelihood that I would be on the top 10. And then when they wanted to expel me, I said, fine. Like if you want to expel me, that's fine. So I got called to the principal's office and the principal was like, hey, like you've been suspended for the 3rd time. And we have this rule that if you're suspended 3 times, like you're gone. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess my brother and I will have to like look for a new school because like it's kind of like a package deal.
Did your brother know about this?
No. and then he's like, oh, no, that's not what we mean. And I was like, okay, what do you mean? so in the end, I was like, okay, like if you do this one more time, you're gone.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like how my brother ended up like saving me.
That's so funny without knowing even.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're like kind of like super smart, rebellious, and kind of, you know, yeah, kind of like you're saying, like very anti-authority in high school and all that. Did you date in high school? Were you like, were you good with girls?
I was like, I didn't date a ton. Yeah, I didn't know. It's like, so I was like, I think
Like compared to your friend group, you know, your group.
yeah. And like I had this like long-term girlfriend in high school, and she was like super pretty, and she was like super smart, and like she was kind of like a cool girl, and like so yeah, like, I guess like I was popular, yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? Like, cause like you kind of break the mold of so many profiles, you know? You usually have like the, you know, pure kind of like nerdy, super shy kid, you know, that like is there. And then you have the kind of like, you know, super outgoing, you know, kind of athlete, etc. You're kind of like in this like weird mix of both where you're like rebellious, but at the same time you're like super smart and got in and like, etc. It's like so interesting, right? Like,
yeah, I guess it's like also a product of being in these environments that were kind of like academic environments. Like I'm pretty sure that, I don't know, if I was in a rough
school,
like I'll be like this nerd that people would be like making fun of. So
interesting. And so do you think that like if you had kids and your kid was like you would like act how?
I'd be like, yes. This guy's
you
so
really
amazing.
think so? If like he's getting called to the principal many times and like,
I guess like growing up, there weren't like limits were not super well. Like I didn't understand like the value of limits, and I think my parents like they were just, especially my dad, he was like just obsessed with this like concept of like freedom and like people got to be free.
It's like military government in Argentina,
exactly.
Right? That makes sense.
Yeah. But so I think what I would do differently is like, oh, you know, like rules and structure, like they're there to help you, right? So I'll try to explain that to my kids, and my parents, in some ways, you know, like I'll get called to like the principal's office, and my dad is just like, I'm just not going, you know, like you guys do whatever you want, like I'm not going. And then my mom, she would go, and she would defend me, you know, like so for example, if I corrected a teacher in front of the class, and the teacher got really mad, and then I started like yelling at me, my mom would say, but he was right. You know, like, so I think I wouldn't do that. Like I would like, hey man, you know, like think about this. Like there's the school got to work because like there's all these kids, and like we need rules for like everyone to learn well together. So I'll try to approach it from that perspective. But I guess I'll find it like kind of funny. Maybe.
Where was your brother in all this? Like, you know, how did your relationship with him? Because you guys are very close in age, right? Like 2 years difference.
2 years apart.
He's also super smart, but you guys are very different.
Yeah. So yeah, he's probably like smarter than I am, but like I'm hardworking. So
yeah.
So kind of like
compensates a little bit.
Yeah. And like we're extremely competitive, right?
You were like super competitive growing up with him?
Very competitive.
So like you wanted to be like, if he was like second, you wanted to be first. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Interesting.
Exactly.
I mean, he went to France first, right?
He did.
Did that inspire you somehow or no? You think it was like
yeah, that did for sure. So when he got into college, he found out about this program, and I was like, oh, like that's the thing I'm gonna do. Like, and I was still like 2 years away from college, and I was like, oh, okay, like so I'm gonna go to this college, and like I'm gonna do this program.
And was it like a program that like you wanted to do because you actually wanted to go to study in France, or was it just like really hard to get selected for it? So it seemed like the like most achieving thing you could do at that time.
I wanted to go to the best college I could, and like I wanted to see the world. Like I was like, hey, Brazil is just there's not what else is out there, right?
Yeah.
I think at some point, like my first choice was like, hey, like I should go to the US, but then I was like, okay, there's this money thing. So I was like, okay, this is the best thing that I can do that will allow me to go out of the country. And then there was also this thing where my dad was like, yeah, schools in France are so much better than in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and how was it like you got there and now you've been in Brazil your whole life, right? You got there, you speak no French, right?
No French.
Which is crazy to think about. And the classes were in French.
All in French.
How the fuck did you like manage?
Oh, that was so hard. That was so hard. Yeah, and like in France, like they're very into math, and like math is like very, very advanced. So like studying like math in French was really hard.
Would you just like lock yourself in your room and study like really, really hard?
So the program, like this program that the government does is like very well done. So like they send you like 3 months in advance. And, like you're living with a French family and like you're studying like French like the whole day.
Were you rebellious with the French family? Or no?
No, I love them. They're awesome.
Yeah,
they're really great. So that like kind of like, so I learned a little bit. So I learned kind of like enough, and then math and like physics. So it was basically like math and physics. So like there's not a lot of text, you know, like it's just like
Formulas.
Yeah. But it was just really hard. Like the first 6 months were just incredibly hard because it's like my identity was like, hey, like, I'm the smart kid. Like that's why I'm like, I got into places and then like, and people was like, wow, like how can you do this? And then I got there, and then I was worse than most of the French students because, you know, I just wasn't prepared for that. And I remember like it was the only time in my life where I felt discriminated against. And the French system is very competitive, and like for this top schools, like there's very few spots. And so students like before they go to college, like they go to this like prep schools where they kill themselves. Like they study very, very hard. And then once they get in, like there's 20% of the spots are reserved for like international students. And the French students, like they really resented the international students. Because they're like, you're being paid by my government, my taxes.
My taxes.
And like, we have fewer spots because you guys are here. And we do better in class than you guys. So
why does it even make any sense?
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
And I think the French are not known for being like the most welcoming.
Yes.
So I remember I was like, oh, like my identity was like I'm a smart kid, and like first semester I'm there, like I'm doing okay, but like I'm not doing great. And then I remember I had this friend, and I came to him one day. I was like, dude, you know, like I don't know what's going on. Like I'm not doing well. You know, like I feel like I'm stupid. And then he turns to me and was like, yeah, it's because you are. And he wasn't joking. I was like,
really?
Yeah. And like, so there was this thing where like, they felt like a lot of people felt like, oh yeah, this guy's just not as smart, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was this like extra motivation, like to study really hard and do really well.
And at this point in time, right, like did you already know kind of like what the workplace, like what starting a company might be, what like the best job, like what, it's still like very academic.
No, so academic. And the French school system has wonderful things, like you go very deep in math, but it's not practical at all. It's like so theoretical. And that's probably why there's way fewer companies being started in France. Because it's like, okay, go study math, go study pure math, right? So I was spending all my time saying like, okay, I gotta be better at this, and like I need to like beat these other students. So I wasn't spending time learning about businesses, learning about all the stuff that would end up being more important in my life. And then everything changed when there was this one lecture, and there was this one entrepreneur that he had been to. I went to this school called Central Paris Engineering School. And this guy had gone there, and he had started this company called Business Objects. He sold the company for like 5 billion euros.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was the first time I was in the same room as an entrepreneur. And he gave this talk, and the part that's most memorable to me is not the really smart things that he said. It's the dumb things that he said. Because in my mind, it's like, oh, like some of them, I hadn't really thought about like how companies are started, and like in my mind, it's like, oh, like companies are these things that kind of exist. And then like you see the guy, and it's like he's a human being, and like yeah, he's super smart and says a bunch of like smart things, but then he says some things that are just like
not that smart.
Not that smart.
Do you remember anything that he said that wasn't that smart?
No, I don't remember. I remember one thing that he said that was just so gracious. He's like, you know, not long ago I was sitting in the same chairs that you guys are sitting, and I did this thing, and so can you. And that was profound.
Yeah, for the first time, like someone saying, "Hey, this is like possible," right?
Yeah, it's like this guy is like seeing, he's like, hey, you can do it. It was like I think the entire college was, the college was very small, but it was like, I think probably like 300 people watching the lecture. But that was profound.
In that moment, you're like, "Hey, this is like really
Yeah.
changed me."
Yeah. And then I was like, the cool thing is to start a company.
Did you ever talk to this guy or reach out to him?
It's just so funny because I told this story to my partner, Peter. And it turns out that Peter's super good friends with this guy.
Really?
Yeah.
You should reach out to him.
And he lives like a few blocks from where I live.
Here?
Yeah, in Atherton.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
So I should reach out and I should tell him that he changed my life,
Because think of like, imagine if someone did that to you, like how rewarding that would be, right? To feel that you were like, one thing that you did kind of randomly, probably someone just invited a guy, hey, come speak at this college. Like, okay, yeah, why not? And he like, inspired someone to build so much.
Yeah. And that kind of became like the definition of success for me.
So that's when entrepreneurship became like, okay, this is like what's cool.
I think if I had to pick one moment, that would be the moment.
Makes sense.
And I remember like as I progressively started doing better and better in college. But every time like I was very competitive. Like every time I felt like the other kids, like they didn't admire me because there was not much to be admired. I was like one day they're going to invite me to like give a lecture here and then I'm going to show them.
Yeah.
It's going to take 20 years.
It's so funny how like this chip on the shoulder is like so common among entrepreneurs, right? Like of like wanting to like prove something or like get out of something, like because you need that like extra motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started going better in France, and you graduated and you did well. And then at this point, did you have a path you wanted to go through, or no? It was still like
it was still kind of fuzzy. It's like, okay, I want to start a company, and then I kind of started being more aware of this.
And you went to travel for a while, right? Like when was that?
No, it's just like
in
in
the
college.
summers?
Yeah, there's like there was a couple of summers.
What's the craziest thing you did traveling?
So my best friend in college was this Indian guy, and like he always told me about like how India was amazing. So for one summer, like I went to India, and I was like going like all over India, and then I was there with my brother, and we rented like these motorcycles, and there was this like tiny road that crossed from India to China, and there's a lot of conflicts between like India and China. Like there's this like Kashmir, like this region that is like there's like a dispute where exactly the lines are. And so when we rented the motorcycles, the place that rented it, they said, hey, like you guys can go anywhere except for this little road here, because like that's controlled by the military. And
of course, that's where you want to go.
and
I can't go there. That's where I want to go.
Exactly. And then a really cool thing is the highest altitude that you can do, can go on a road.
Oh, wow.
It's like kind of crosses the Himalayas, right? Or at least like there's a big sign that says that there. And so that was super cool. And then we had, so there was this checkpoints. And so my brother and I, we loved India because it felt.
And your brother was with you?
Yeah. And like India felt a little bit like Brazil. And yeah, like you have to negotiate with things.
Like the haggling.
And like people don't really follow the rules, right? So like we're like going up this mountain and I was like, hey, like let's just see how far can we go. And there was this military checkpoints. And then there's like, oh, like, okay, you can't come through here. And we'll tell the guards, no, like we have this special authorization from the government. And then people are like, oh, okay, if you have the authorization, then go. And
they're crazy.
Like, yeah.
That's so crazy. Okay, so then where'd you go after that? So like, let's say you graduated from Paris and
so the following summer, I was just so fascinated by India that I went back and I was curious about the culture. So like I lived in the following year, like I went back and I lived in a temple for a month.
What?
Yeah. So just I was like, hey, like I want to learn how to meditate. And then I was like vegetarian for a month, and like I was just like 5 hours of meditation and yoga. And
do you think it really changed you that month?
I think so. I think like all these experiences, especially like when you're that young, like I think all these experiences kind of like start composing who you are.
It does seem like, like spending a month in India meditating, seems like this like transformative experience. I'm curious if was it all that, or was it like, it was cool, but not that transformative?
I think, yeah, I think it is transformational, but like, I think it's like in subtle ways, you know, it's like, I think it's just spending a ton of time, especially like when you're, so the month on the temple, I did it right when I finished college. So I finished college and then I got a job. And then there was this period between like starting the job and college. And I was just there for a month and like you're reflecting. And I think like when you eliminate like all the distractions of the day to day, like you really get in touch of like, hey, like who are you when like there's no one else around and like when there's like no demands on your time. And you know, I don't think like I'll ever be in a situation like that again where like, hey, I'm here for a month. Like I have like absolutely nothing to do. Like no one will call me. Like no one will get in touch, and you can just like be there and like walk.
Be present.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wow. So went to India for a month, came back, and then real life started, right? Like you graduate, you're an adult now. What did you do?
So my last year of college, I was already like, okay, it's super clear to me. Like the coolest thing that someone can do is start a company. Like that is the coolest thing. And you know, so when I started college in Brazil, I was actually studying engineering and psychology because it was kind of like passions that I had in my life were like engineering and psychology. And I was like, okay, like I knew it had to be something digital and like I like games, but we're like, okay, I'm gonna start a company and I'm gonna compete with Nintendo. That sounds dumb, you know, like why would someone play my games and not like Nintendo's games or like Electronic Arts? Again, I had no friends that had ever started a company. I had no idea like how to do it. And I think it's a mixture of like I was just less savvy and like I think there was also like less material online. So I just really didn't know. But intuitively, it's like, okay, like I don't know what's the path to do it. So, but if you're in engineering school, then what everyone's saying is like, oh, like if you're smart, you go work for a bank. That's what you do. And to me, like that's a lesson on like how susceptible we are to our environments. Because whatever is cool in the place that you are, like you end up doing that. And so I was like, okay, like, I went to work for a bank. So I was a credit derivatives trader for JP Morgan in London for a year. But getting like, once I got there, it was super clear to me. It's like, oh man, like this can't be my life, you know? Mm-hmm. I was like, oh.
Did it pay well or no?
There's a path.
There's a path to pay well.
Yeah. There's a path. You know,
Did you know all the salaries that you would make at every point in time, the same way you knew how things cost?
Yeah, 100%. So this big banks of JP Morgan, like they're a lesson in HR because like their programs are just so well done. So I did like a summer internship. On the summer internship, like you rotate between like six
departments.
Six different departments. And I knew I wanted to do trading. And then like I was like, and so I appreciated some things about the bank because, you know, like I always loved talking about money. And in my household, like that was kind of like a taboo.
I remember we bonded over that when we met because like it's a very taboo topic and you don't have a lot of people talk about it.
Yeah. So when I was in these rotations, I would ask, like I'll go to the head of the desk. I was like, hey, what was last year's P&L? You know, and they appreciated it. It's like, yeah, man, like, you know, you're an intern. You wanna know how this business did last year. So I went to like all these different desks, and they all liked me. So I had like 6 offers, and then I picked the one that I think it was the one. It was either the one that had the highest P&L or the second highest, because like I think credit is very cool. Like I think the highest was like rates, but that was kind of government, and like I was that's less interesting. And then credit is like, oh, like okay, these guys did great, and then like you learn about companies, and I think companies are the coolest thing, and like learning like the credit of these companies, like I think, oh yeah, that's cool. So I want to do that, and so I knew how well the desk had done, and like I knew that like your bonus was proportional to like how well the desk did, and like I kind of knew like what the path was. Like the subject was very interesting. I think
so like at this point, when you thought about, wow, like if I do really well, like how much was someone making like 5 years later or something like that?
So that was like a super interesting point in time. I think there was this guy that was like 27 maybe, and I think he got like he got like a $5 million bonus because like he was a star trader, and like that guy was kind of like my boss. So I was like, yeah, okay,
This is what great looks like.
yeah. I was like, yeah, this is what great looks like.
Yeah. You were like 22.
I was 22,
Yeah.
and the credit trading is very interesting. You know, it's like the activity, it looks a little bit like a video game. Like you have all these numbers and like it just
It's like the movies.
yeah. But then like this underlying thing, which is like there's all these companies and like you need to understand the companies, and these derivatives are they're very interesting because there's a lot of math that goes into it. And then if you're good in math, like you start having like all these great intuitions. So so I was like, this is cool. Like you learn about companies, like you do this thing that is very competitive. Like there's a score every day, and like you can like beat other people. There's all like these game elements to it. But then the thing that was like always important to me was like this is gonna sound lame, but like this like human connection. Like that is something that like always mattered a lot to me. And I think that's something that I miss a lot about Brazil actually. Because I think the Brazil and the US, they're very different. And the biggest difference is Brazilians are way more communal. And it's like, okay, the notion of like the individual is very different from the US. Like you're always like optimizing for a small group, and like it can be your family, like it can
Like
be
the men of your little community who went to, try to kill the other guy who like,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Like that's pretty extreme, but like I don't think you would see something like that in the US. It's like, hey, like imagine like
Yeah, it's
all your neighbors here, that's a get together to like, So, but to me it's like, okay, like are these people, like am I connected to these people? And then there's no, like I'm not connected to these people, and these people have no interest in connecting with me. So that was one thing. The other thing is like big companies, they need a lot of structure. And so your career is going to develop like over a very long time horizon. I was like, oh man, like it just felt too slow. There was the politics, and there's another thing, which was, you want to be proud of your work. Like you want to feel like, okay, I'm doing something that is contributing. Like I think, especially like coming from Brazil and like moving to like a developed country. It's like, man, a lot of people, I think that were born here in the Bay Area, like, I think they kind of like take for granted that the world is just like this amazing place. But like civilization makes places great, but great places are not great naturally. Like naturally places suck. And the way places become great is like for a lot of people like contributing, right? So so there was a part of me who's like, oh, like I wanna make sure that whatever I'm doing is making
the place better.
Yeah.
The world a better place is like a cliche, but yes, like the feeling is the same.
Yeah, it's like, hey, like there's places in the world that suck, the places that are amazing. I want to be the place that is amazing, and like I want to contribute for the place to be like even more amazing, right? And I think if you're working in like capital markets, I think capital markets are super important. But it's like the contribution that you're having is just so indirect that I think especially like when you're 22, like it's very hard for you to have an intuition. It's like, okay, you spend the entire day trading, and then there's a number at the end of the day of how much money you made or lost. And it's okay, like, did you actually contribute to something? It's just very indirect. So it's like, hey, like I wanted to do something that was more tangible, and like I had these things like, hey, like if I do a company, like there's a product and people use the product.
Yeah, it's kind of like the bowels of capitalism versus the actual product, right? Like the capital markets, they're extremely important, but they're like kind of in the background there.
Yeah, they're extremely important, but like a lot of times like you're in the bowels, like, but it's so indirect that sometimes like you may be contributing or may not be contributing. So for example, like
maybe be hurting sometimes.
Exactly. Like imagine you have a fund that is like a patent troll.
Yeah.
Like, are you contributing to capitalism, or like, are you just like sucking? Capitalism?
Or just like extorting it.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, I wasn't super happy with like the connection piece, and like I wasn't super happy with the what's the tangible result of my work? And then I was still thinking like the coolest thing that someone can do is like start a company. So like, hey, like I'm gonna start this company, and then the app stores were taking off. So this is 2010, and like the app stores were taking off.
Did you have an iPhone?
I didn't.
You did.
I didn't. You know, it's so dumb because like I didn't have. So before like joining the bank, I didn't have money.
Yeah.
Right. I was like living on the government allowance. I guess the government allowance wasn't bad. I was like €1,100 a month. And I guess if I had like saved up, I could have bought an iPhone with that money. But I was just like, it was so frugal, man. And then the bank gave us like Blackberries. I was like, okay, fine, I have a Blackberry. So I was like, okay, app stores.
But you saw that happen even without having an iPhone, which is crazy.
Yeah.
How?
I think in 2010, the app store was like what AI is today.
It was just like obvious kind of thing.
I think it was obvious that it's going to be important.
Yeah.
Like how and what format and like what's the best way to like, that wasn't obvious, but it was obvious like, okay, mobile phones, it's going to be very important.
Yeah.
You know, like people walking around with computers on their pockets, it's super important.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know, I love games. Like, I don't think I can compete with Nintendo, but like mobile games, I think it's going to be a thing. And then there was this aspect that was, you know what? If it doesn't work, fine. Doesn't matter. So I called my brother and said, hey, like, let's just make mobile games.
Did you have other ideas, or that was kind of the main idea?
We had other ideas.
What was a close second?
So there's two close seconds. One was make an app for traffic, kind of like what Waze ended up doing. And you know, I wasn't like I'm a software engineer, but the reality is like I wasn't like deep in software engineering.
Because you graduated mechanical engineering, right? Like that was
yeah. So I could code, but I wasn't a great coder. And then, but I had a couple friends that were like good coders. And then it was like I told them like, hey, like I want to make kind of like a Google Maps that has the traffic in there so that people know like what's the best route. And then I talked to this friend like, hey, like how long do you think it will take? And this friend of mine said, oh, like this is really hard, and like this is what you want to do. And I think for you to build this app is gonna take you a year. Right? And it's like my brother and I was like, hey, like the two of us. And like, oh shit. So okay, so that thought was like, okay, that's kind of like too complicated. And that was more like, hey, this feels like a business opportunity, but it wasn't like, oh man, imagine how cool it would be. And the game thing was like, man, imagine how cool would it be.
Yeah.
Right? But it was like, oh, if we're being honest, like we don't know if it's a good business idea or not, but like it would be so cool. And like this is the thing that we want to do.
So you didn't know if it was gonna be a good business? You hadn't like studied up like
well, as much as you can.
It wasn't a market yet, right? Like
it wasn't a market.
You were just starting.
Yeah, it was just starting. So my brother and I we had this really important like sit down before he quit his job. And we talked, let's say, hey, like let's start to evaluate like what's the chance? What do you think is the chance that this business is gonna be successful? And what do you think is the chance that we're gonna fail? And like a year from now, like we'll come back crawling to our bosses, like asking for our jobs back. And he said, like, I think there's like a 75% chance this will fail. And I was like, oh, okay, I can live with that. Because there's like this 25% chance that we'll get to like make games for a living.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we ended up doing.
You know, one of the things that like your story makes me think about a lot is, you know, obviously looking through, you were like, you know, extremely hardworking, extremely smart, etc. But then when it worked, you said the first year you guys did 6 million in profit or something like that, right? Do you think that would be possible done like 3 years later?
No
or 4
way.
years later?
No way.
Like how much timing of like picking the right tailwinds and the right markets, right? Like really matter, right?
I mean, there's people that made, I think if we started like 3 years later, I think would have done well, but I think it would have taken like a lot longer because the games that were successful, they're just more sophisticated, right? So in 2010, when we started looking at the market, man, there was this platform, there's all these consumers that wanted games and no one
was doing it.
no one was doing high quality free games. There weren't any. Like the biggest game in the world was Angry Birds, and they were charging like $1, $1 per download, right? So I think it's kind of, there's a lot of similarities with AI right now. You know, it's like there's people love ChatGPT, and there's all these use cases that people just are they're dying to have something, but there is like, no one created these experiences yet, right? So I think right now, like, and today, like you hear the stories about this influencer that just like plugged in a ChatGPT version they create a chat that is branded with her name. It's like, hey, talk to me, and like just some dumb prompt engineering, and she's making like $100,000 a month, right?
That was kind of your guys' experience, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that was like our experience, you know.
Yeah.
So I think if I'd started like a few years later, it would have been slower, it would be harder.
Yeah, because you didn't have that kind of like latent demand and like no supply. And then so how was it, like, you know, I remember you told me the story that wasn't the first month you guys made like a couple $100,000 or something like that?
No, it took a few months. So the first game we did failed.
Yeah.
And then the second game we did, we were like literally like working like over 100 hours a week, right? So like the first 6 months of the company, I think first year of the company, I worked every single day, like Christmas,
Saturday, Sunday, Christmas, New Year's.
New Year's, my birthday, like every single day, right?
And did you feel like, did you do that because like you just really wanted to do that, or do you feel it was required? Like what was driving that?
So I think it was a mix of, we're just super excited.
Yeah.
You know, I love this feeling of like, hey, like this secret hidden in plain sight. Because like as we started studying the App Store more, we started seeing cases of these apps that took off. And it was like, oh, we can make something that is better than this. So our thing is going to take off.
Yeah.
So this is like this, oh my God, like this is such an amazing opportunity. I can't believe this opportunity exists. So I think there was that. There's also the fact that I quit my job at JP Morgan, and then I moved back to Brazil. And like, because we couldn't raise money, I had to like move back to my parents' place. And then everyone I knew thought I was a loser. and people asked me, oh, Victor, what are you doing now? I was like, oh, like I'm gonna start a company. I was like, oh, cool. Like, what are you gonna do?
Good luck, right? Like, really.
And like startups weren't the thing in Brazil, and so it's like, hey, what are you gonna do? Like, oh, I'm gonna make games for mobile phones. And people looked at me and like,
Who plays games on mobile phones?
I was like, oh, like, you mean like that Snake game? Like, you can't believe like how many times I heard people ask me, it's like, oh, like, so you're making that Snake game?
I heard from Nokia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then I was like, no, like smartphones, all that. So okay. So there's this intense pressure of like, I don't know if I'm gonna succeed or not. Like everyone thinks I'm a failure. And there's this thing of like trying to prove to the world, like, no, you know, like I'm right. Mobile games is a great opportunity. And my brother and I, like, we're capable. We can make a company. Like we can make products that people like. And then it's just like making games is just really, really fun, you know? And it's like, we're like, hey, this is way more fun than college, way more fun than working at the bank. So I think it was a combination of all that. So there was no sense of like, oh, I have to do this thing. But there was this thing, I was like, hey, like I really want to do this thing.
Yeah. So when did it like take off? Like what was the first thing to like work?
So the second game that we launched, we decided to launch it for free.
And this was Racing Penguins already?
This is Racing Penguin, yeah. So we spent like, I think this was like month 4 probably. And it was a very well done game. I think it was, I think first game was like 2 weeks, and then Racing Penguin took 3 months. And that game we knew was a great game. You know, like we gave to our friends to play, like everyone loved it. And there wasn't like, we felt that there wasn't like a game of that quality that was free. And then we launched it for free.
Was there a similar paid game that you guys kind of inspired?
There's a lot of our initial strategy was seeing like, hey, what are the things that are working on paid?
Yeah, which is really smart.
Yeah, and then like we do things that are inspired that are
free.
Yeah, but the reality is like it's not. We didn't see freemium coming. We're just like, hey, we just want people to play our game. And then right now people don't play our games, so that's a huge problem. Like, and then if you play our games but we can't make money, that's still a problem, but that's a smaller problem. So like, let's just launch it for free. So we launched it for free, and that game took off. Like that game really took off, and then like we're making no money because the game was free. But then we, like a week later, like we introduced ads, and then we started making money. And then I think we were making like a few thousands of dollars a day, which
It was infinite money in Brazil, right?
infinite money.
Yeah.
Infinite money. But then like the real unlock is like, I think a couple weeks later, we started introducing in-app purchases.
Yeah.
And like then it's like, okay, like this is gonna be a big business. Well, at the time we thought, okay, like this is gonna work. And then we just couldn't believe, like we couldn't believe like, hey, like people are downloading this game and like, and we have revenue, we have customers. And then we use that to like hire a better team, and with that like make better games, and like that was the loop for 9 years. And so for the 9 years, like we made all these games that collectively like made like over $1 billion, like well over $1 billion in revenue.
It's insane. Yeah. And what was the feeling when like you got the first, I don't know, like 100 grand or something like that? Like what did you do with it? Like what did it feel like? Would you tear your pay? Like how did it feel?
That's crazy.
Because like think about it, before for you to accumulate like 100 grand was like so long. You had to save up for so much, right? Like,
yeah, I think like in 6 months, like we had saved up more money than our parents had like in their entire lives.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's just like this very surreal feeling of like, oh, you have this theory in your head. It's like, hey, like if I do this thing, I'm gonna make a company. And it was very theoretical. It's like, hey, like mobile phones, they're gonna be a thing, and then people are gonna play games on their phones, and they should play free games, and you should make games free, and then like sell some stuff in it. It sounds like a great theory, but then it works in practice. And you're like, fuck, And I remember, like my parents, like they're not very tech savvy, and like I remember, like when my brother and I were like explaining to our parents, like, hey, so like here's what we did. We went on the internet, and then like we learned how to make a game
on like YouTube.
On YouTube, and then like we went on the Apple website, and like we wrote this game and we uploaded the game, and now we have a company, and it's a real company, right? That was like very cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. And didn't you buy your parents a car like or really quick?
Yeah, that was the first thing we did. Like the first thing. So my dad loves cars.
Yeah.
But he had never like bought a nice car. And then with the first money that we got from the company, we bought our dad our car.
I remember when you told me this, you're like, you're a better son than I am. I bought like a huge MacBook, like all the all this stuff when I got my first money.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then like there's this weird thing. Like I read somewhere that like money changes you.
Yeah.
So for the first year that the company worked, I read someone was like, hey, like if you make money, like you shouldn't spend it right away. So for the first year, I spent 1%.
I missed that class.
You obviously missed that class. but I spent 1% of the money that we dividend out of the company.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And then you started this company, and like I mean, in the beginning, it probably felt like you hired a couple of people and friends, right? Like it didn't feel like a real company, right? Like for a little while.
Yeah.
When did it start feeling like, okay, this is like a corporation now?
Oh God, corporation. Hopefully never.
At some point, like it starts feeling like, okay, there's like, I don't know everyone in the company, and like,
yeah. So the beginning was so fun.
Yeah.
And so we hired a lot of our friends from like Math Olympiad, and people, there's a bunch of people that thought we were smart and like wanted to work with us, and that was great. And I think I don't know, maybe like 2-3 years in, I think we're like at 100 people. And then when you're at 100 people, it's weird. Like I think the weird feeling is, like I used to interview like almost everyone that we hired, but then it started happening like, okay, maybe I was on a trip and then we hired someone and then I didn't interview that person. And then you're walking around in the halls, and like you see someone and it's like, oh, like who's that person? And it's the weirdest feeling. Like, cause you start a company and it's like everyone that you know so well, especially because we had all these programs for people to spend all their time together. So it really felt like it was a very tight group.
The opposite of remote.
Opposite.
Yeah.
And so when you see someone that you haven't seen that face before, it's almost like you're walking in your house and there's a person walking in your house. And it's like who's this person? Like, what is this person doing here?
Yeah. No, I totally relate to the feeling. It's a very unique moment in time.
Yeah.
What was happening around your life at this point, right? Like now, did you like just not have any social life? Did you like have a girlfriend? Like, did anyone know? Because you were like, you had this bad VC experience, so you're super secretive. Like, who knew about this? Like,
there was no life
yeah
beyond the company. And we had this theory for the company that is like, hey, like we want the company to be a one-stop shop.
I remember this.
It's the place that you come to learn. It's the place that you come to like do great work, to make friends, to make money,
eat,
right? So we had this program that if you lived on a half-mile radius of the office, we would pay for your rent, and then we would serve dinner. So like every night at 8 p.m. we would serve dinner, like including weekends, and we would hire people from different states in Brazil and like would move them like everyone to Sao Paulo. A lot of them would get like apartments, like they would share apartments. So, like this is a pretty tight community that people, and of course, like these young people, like they don't want to cook. So we always spend all of our time together. And my brother and I were there like 24/7, right? So I had no girlfriend. And all of my friends were from the company. And like I was spending like literally like for the first few years, like zero time. The only people that I saw outside the company were my parents. No one knew of the success and were like low profile, and I liked it.
And there's this crazy thing where I think there's very few companies in Brazil. I can only think of another one that made money in US dollars but spent money in reais, which was like a very nice feature.
Yeah.
Of
what's the other one?
Hotmart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's the only two that I can think of.
Yeah.
That like do this, and
yeah.
It made it like very, very high margin, right? Which is very different than the average startup founder in Silicon Valley, where like to get to profitability, it's like 11 years in, 12 years in.
Yeah.
You guys are like year one.
Yeah.
Do you think that shaped how you think about business?
Well, for us, doing a startup that would take 11 years to be profitable wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
Like when we decided to start the company, we decided to do it in Brazil, and there was no venture capital in Brazil.
Yeah.
And for all its many, many flaws, venture capital allows people to make companies that don't make money for a very long time, right?
Yeah. Let's go through the founder journey a little bit, right? Like, what do you think now, looking back to the journey, and we'll get to your investor phase in a bit, but what are the things that are like really cool about being a founder and a CEO, and what are the things that kind of suck?
Oh man. In general, like being a founder is amazing. It's like, it's the coolest experience that I had in my life for sure. And it's probably true for you as well.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And I think the coolest thing is, it's like, hey, you start with an idea and like you have this theory, like a theory, like, okay, if I do this thing, it's gonna happen. And then in my case, it's like people wanna play free games on their phones. And then you see it happening in the world. And like this, the coolest thing is like, at one moment in time, 50% of the iPhones in Brazil had our game Racing Penguin. Right?
Oh wow.
Yeah. And then like you're talking to people and people ask you like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, like, show me your phone. Like I do this. It's very cool. It's like, oh, I love this game. This thing like, hey, like you make products that people love.
Yeah.
And then people tell you about it, like they post comments and like, so that part is amazing. And so I think both like the idea that you can imagine something and then that thing can exist and then that real people use it and they derive joy from using it. So that whole loop is like, it's so awesome. It's like, you feel like, oh shit, like I'm part of this, like I'm part of like, I think civilization is a miracle. Like the fact that like people, they come together and like living in a civilized society is like just so radically better than like living in the jungle. And the idea that people come together and make life so amazing. And like you feel like you're a part of it, like you're an important part of it. It's like just people like you that create products and offer these products out. So I think that part is awesome. I think the part that creating a team, you know, it's like, and when you're a founder, like you get to decide like what the culture is. And it's like, hey, like here's the stuff that we believe in, and then we want to get people that believe in the same things. And then, like there's a team, like, and it's your team. So this idea that okay, like you have this goal, we want people to have fun. We want to make games that will allow people to have fun. And like there's all these people that want to do the same thing, and you all get together, and you decide these rules of interaction, and then people are happy doing it, and
you're happy doing it, right?
You're very happy doing it.
You kind of built what you would love to work for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it feels like this own little country, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that part is amazing. So you feel this is the progress of society happens like this, and you're part of it. And then like the part that is not cool is it's just really hard. And it's really hard. It takes a really long time. And the stress is real.
For, and obviously we talked about this a bunch, but for those who like haven't founded a company yet, like describe like what's the kind of stress? Because like from the outside you look and it's like, dude, like you're rich, you're successful, you pick your team, like what can possibly stress you? You know, like I remember like, so describe like what was that feeling like? So you look back at a company, like if you build a company and the company works, you look back and it's like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, and it feels like this amazing straight line of progress. But my experience is like, it always feels like everything is going wrong. Like always. The entire time it's like, okay, it's going wrong. There's this problem. You spend your entire time with problems. Like give an example, like what is something, I mean, just to make it like.
It's like, oh, this killed me. So we launched the game on Android, and then we launched the game on iOS, and there was a bug. And so Racing Penguin, our first game, there was a bug, and you downloaded the game and you opened it and the game crashed. So the game was unplayable. And the problem with that is the way the algorithms worked at Apple is like, okay, you launch the game, and if you have a lot of downloads in the first minute, then you get this flag of like, okay, this is a hot app. And then you get more exposure. And then you get a lot more downloads. And then if you overcome this trash of downloads, like there's this reinforcing loop, right? So if you're crashing, you miss the loop and like you go to the bottom. So the launch of a game is extremely important, right? So we had launched the Android version. Android version crushed it. And then we launched the Apple version. And Apple at the time was a much bigger market. And then you're like, oh shit, there was a bug. And this bug destroyed the game. And maybe this game is not gonna be a hit because there was this bug. And we were thinking like, okay, we just doomed the company. Like, okay, the company's over, right?
And all these people that like left their jobs to come to work here.
At the time, it was just my brother and I.
Okay.
But still, it's like, hey, like we tried all these things and we had this shot of success.
Yeah.
But we
felt it was like right there, and you
screwed it. Yeah. And like that's one example, but that happens all the time. And sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. It's like, like a constant worry for us is like the servers would go down and like the game would be offline. And then if you're offline, you get negative ratings. So those things were super stressful. And then like Apple, so then like later we had like a shooting game, and then Apple sometimes would complain because like there's violence. And like, yeah, like shooting games are a thing. People love shooting games,
Have you heard of Call of Duty?
Yeah, Call of Duty. Counter-Strike. And then there's like threatening to take us offline. And it's like, man, like you have like a huge company that is running and like the game sustained. So every single day, and then there's a competitor launches, so you have a great game, and then a competitor like clones your game and launches it. And then it's like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Like, is this gonna overtake my game? So on a typical day, there's like 4 or 5 problems that you're solving. Some of them are like real threats to the company. And on a typical day, like nothing good happens, because like progress happens little by little, but problems happen really fast. And the threat of problems, they're always there. So the day to day is like, we say like, oh, building a company is fun, but the reality is like, it's type 2 fun. It's like, it's fun. Like, it's kind of like after the fact. It's kind of like climbing a mountain, right? Like when you're climbing, it's mostly painful.
Yeah, you remember it fondly later, but like when you're going through it, it's like pretty painful.
Yeah.
Did you feel it was like a roller coaster all the time? Because like I remember this day that, and you know me, I'm very optimistic, right?
Very.
Yeah. And I remember this one day where at the same day, in the morning, I was looking, at like Gulfstream's website of like my future private jet, I was like 18. And the later that day, something shitty happened and I was looking at jobs to like apply for jobs. Like in like literally one day, like the fluctuation. It's something like that. Like, did you ever feel that?
Yes. So much.
Yeah.
Especially when you're building on top of someone else's platform, like in our case, like Apple and Google, they can change the rules of the game from one day to the next. So you're always
subject to their
And so for us, one thing the rankings, like our games were always like very well ranked, and that's how we got a lot of downloads. And like the rules, the rules of the ranking are very opaque. So you're always like, oh, like are these people gonna change something, and then it's gonna affect your distribution.
With the benefit of hindsight now, you're looking over the company, the 12-year history. If you were to distill to a couple things that made it work early on, like besides the obvious and hard work and like great team and culture and like all the stuff that requires any company, but just like from the business perspective, like how would you distill it?
So these things that you're saying, like, oh, like besides these things, I remember I was and I still am like a student of business, right? Like I love studying businesses, understanding why they worked. And it's such a cliche. People saying, oh, it's all about the people.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, hey, great people, great culture, everything else works. And I was like, this is the most useless advice I've ever gotten. But the reality is like, those things are true, but they were just like told in a way that like didn't resonate with me. Like as I reflect back on like, hey, what made it work? I think Wildlife, there's one thing that we got right in the beginning, which is people play free games on their phones. That was like a good insight. But then I don't think like we had a radically insightful strategy, but I think we had like amazing execution. And like what's downstream of like that amazing execution? It's like people and culture, but like just being much more granular. It's like, oh, like hire great people. Yeah, of course.
But I guess like where did the great execution matter the most? Let's put it like that. Like where were the places within the company where? It's
like 1,000 small details. And it's like, for example, if you think about games, it lists like the 10 most successful games of all time. At least 8 of these games, like they follow the same pattern, which is there was a game that was successful, but it was hard to access this game. And then someone else came in and made the same play pattern. It was much more easy to access. So for example, League of Legends. There was Dota. Like people had to buy the game. It was hard to get it. Like it was a mod. And then League of Legends came along and said, hey, like we're gonna make this game for free. And then it crushed, became one of the biggest games in history, right? And like so the history of games is a lot like that. But it's like you gotta make a great product. And it's all the smart details. Like why is iPhone better than Android? It's like all the small details. And then for us, it was basically product and distribution. And we were deep experts on how people discovered apps in the App Store. It's like, okay, what are the keywords that people like type most? And then how does Apple, if you have a keyword that a lot of people have the same keyword, like how does Apple rank them?
Almost like SEO for Apple.
It's like we're very deep in SEO, we're very deep in product. But in the end, it's just like, it's people that care a lot and people that, hey, like their entire life is that thing, right? So like we did this thing So this thing of like, hey, there's a bunch of like really smart programs. Like this, for example, this thing where like 70% of the company lived within a half-mile radius. Like that's crazy. Like I think that was a great intuition back then. And like we had dinner every night, like everyone together every night having dinner. And all these young kids that loved games. And then we had this thing that we did, we called like Game of the Week. And in the beginning was every single employee. So every Tuesday we had pizza night at the company. And every single employee of the company, they had to go in front of the entire company and present for a minute what was the most fun game he had discovered that week. And if you think about it, it's like, okay, so every single employee had to play at least one new game and then tell us like what was cool about that game. So there's like all learning that happened there, but also it was a culture thing. It's like people that didn't like games, they left. People that didn't like to spend Tuesdays talking about games like at like 9 p.m., they left, right? And then you were left with people that were just like really obsessed with what will games look like on mobile phones. And I think you get like really smart people that really care about what they're doing and that want to spend all their time doing it. Like that explains a lot of the success, because a lot of the success is like this games is a place where like crazy attention to detail matters a lot. And yeah, it's an unsatisfying answer, right? Because like
no, it's pretty satisfying. It's pretty good. Just trying to understand, like, again, like, I'll give an example, right? Like at Brex, the finance team like mattered a lot. So spending a lot of time there, kind of like makes a big difference in the company because we have these securitizations. So like great execution like matters there, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how much it mattered. Wildlife, I imagine not as much as probably at Brex, given that, the different businesses. But on kind of like SEO, distribution and stuff at the App Store, like, that was like incredibly important to like, invest a lot. So it was the essence of it. The question was a little bit more like trying to understand like what really mattered, in like building the business.
And it was for sure, it's just like product and distribution.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, like the details of the product and people that are obsessed with like, okay, understanding what makes a game fun. And then obsessed with like, okay, how do we make something viral, right? I think you look at these YouTubers nowadays, and I think a lot of the great YouTubers, they understand, like they're experts on the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah.
And they're gonna say, hey, like, okay, my icon, what does my icon has to look like? Okay, that's
thumbnail.
The thumbnail. And they're like, okay, your completion, like the video completion matters a lot. So it's okay, the video completion matters a lot. So you gotta make sure that you have like the entire video you're talking about, the surprise at the end, right? And so just like being obsessed, in the end, it's like common sense with like uncommon discipline.
Did you feel that like your role models kind of evolved over the 12 years you were at the company? Like you had like, or your early role models were different than your late role models, or they kind of like stayed the same?
I think what changed is before I used to think that there was this heroes that they could never be wrong. And like none of what they said was wrong. And like, and now I'm like, okay, you understand that these great entrepreneurs, like they're genius in one domain. They're not genius all around. Like they have this narrow domain where they're genius. And like they do this thing that works really well. And you have to like learn like, okay, where do you take advice from each person, right? So to me, it went from being, okay, my first role model that I met in person was like Jorge Paulo. And yeah, he's incredible, but he's incredible at this one thing, but I should not take advice from him from a thing that he's not incredible at. So I think it just got more nuanced.
Obviously it's hard to talk about yourself in this way, but if you were to guess, maybe ask your brother what he would describe as the thing that, you were a genius over these last years, what do you think he would say?
I think what he would say is like stepping out and understanding how the dynamics of the business will evolve. The dynamics of the market.
The industry dynamics.
The industry dynamics, so that you can be clear on what matters. It's like, okay, given everything that is happening right now, what's likely to happen in the future, and like what are the 2-3 things that we should care about, and the rest is noise.
And what would you say about your brother?
I think my brother, he goes into like incredible depths of a game design. I think his very like in the details, in the deepest of details. So just to give you an example, match 3 games are very big. So some of the largest games in the world are match 3, like, Candy Crush, which is not, from the outside, people think about Candy Crush, but there's like, of the top 10 games, there's probably like 3 that are match 3. And then if you look at the top 50, there's like over 10 that are match 3. And from the outside, like they all look the same. But there's some details that if people tell you, like you're then able to see it, but if people don't tell you, like you can't see it. So, and to give you an example, it's like, okay, we have this match 3 game. It's called Time Blast. So you play Time Blast, and then like if you find 3 things together, like you click, it explodes. But if you find like 6 things together, you create a power up. And if you find 9 things together, you create a super power up. And then if you have 2 power ups together, you have a double super power up. Like you have a double power up. And then you have like 2 super power ups together, you have this double super power up. But then he was playing our game and it's like, oh, like if you match 9 pieces together, you get a super power up. And then if next to it, you match 7 pieces together, you have a medium power up. But then if you mix the super power up with the medium power up, on your next turn, it's easier to create the same combo. So that is the optimal strategy. And if you play just doing that, the game is unbalanced. And the problem,
you just noticed that.
I just noticed that.
Which is like so deep into the like.
Just so deep. And it's like, like I've been making games for 13 years. And like, so we're playing this game, playing it a lot, and it's not performing, like it wasn't performing the way we wanted. And then he wasn't very involved in that game. But then like he played it for a day. And then it's like, yeah, it's obvious. But this happens like when you care, like, and there's just no teaching this. Like you just have to care so much. And I think a parallel with this is like horses. Like horses, like they all look the same. Like you put a bunch of horses, like they all look the same. But if you own a horse, like okay, like this is my horse. And you're able to tell the difference. And it's because like you just care so much and like you notice all the details. The only way is like you gotta look at it for a lot of time and you gotta care very much. And for him, he loved game design. And over a decade, obsessing over the details, these things just like come out more naturally.
That's amazing. I think that's exactly right. And so let's talk about kind of your transition to Benchmark. So I guess like first, like tell a little bit the story of how you met Benchmark. You raised some money and and then a bit the story of like how you decided to go from making games to making investments in it.
Yeah. So the first 9 years of the company were just like my brother and I inventing games. And then okay, we made these games that a lot of people played, and we're thinking, okay, like what's next? Like we can continue for like another 20 years doing that. But we wanted to evolve the model, and we thought about the gaming industry. It was an industry that did not honor like the game creators. If you think about like the book industry or the movie industry or the music industry, all these industries, they start in a certain way, but eventually like the companies become platforms for creators, right? So like if a book publisher is a platform for writers, right? And if you think about games, people create these amazing games, but like these game designers, like no one knows who they are, and like they get paid well, but like they actually don't get paid nearly as much
As the impact that they have.
Yeah, exactly. So you think about like, okay, the person that wrote Harry Potter, like everyone knows who she is. She makes $1 billion. But the person that created a game like Brawl Stars, for example, like no one knows who the person is. Like the game generated like a few $1 billion in revenue, and he gets like nowhere near 1% of that. And then it was like, okay, like let's just rethink what a gaming company is with the creators at the center of it, and like just make a platform for like amazing game designers, right? So that was an idea that we had. And in order to do that, I was like, okay, let's find like all the best game designers in the world, and like let's help them like start their own studios, and then we're gonna like do a profit share. And in order to do that, I had to like move from Brazil. So I moved from Brazil to San Francisco, and I wanted to like be more plugged into the tech ecosystem. And so the company didn't need the money, but we wanted to work with people that knew how to create platforms and like knew how to create a tech company. And so we met like I had like informal conversations with like a bunch of investors. Never shared any numbers, but we're just kind of like wanted to like get to know people, like see what each person had to offer. And then when I was having like some of this like informal conversations, like I met this guy, Peter Fenton, and he was just like so radically more interesting than anyone else that I met. And the thing that struck me is like, hey, he was just so passionate about businesses, and like so passionate about understanding all the businesses that were created and like what made them successful and what was the personality of the founders. And I just felt like, oh, if I spend time with this person. So the real thing that I felt is, man, had I met this guy sooner, my company would be a lot better. Because all these things that I missed in Brazil, I was like, hey, if you're isolated, you're trying to reinvent the wheel so much. And there's this person that knows like how all these companies were created, like knows the people. It's like, man, if only I had met this person when I was starting out, would have avoided so many mistakes, would have gone so much faster. So I was like, yeah, like I really want to work with him, and like his model of investing is one where like the benchmark model is like, hey, each partner is supposed to make like 1 or 2 deals a year. And then you spend a meaningful amount of time like helping the entrepreneur be successful. And I was like, yeah, like I want this guy to be involved. Like I want him to like help me build this company into like everything it can be. So we raised some money from Benchmark, and he joined our board. And then we built out this program, like we set up all the studios around the world, and like they're producing games. And then, like I've talked about how Arthur and I were like competitive growing up, and like that kind of manifested in the company as well. Like for a while we were co-CEOs, and then we needed better governance, and like you know a thing or two about co-CEOs, right?
Yes.
And then I became solo CEO, and then like after we had built the studios, like part of me was like, okay, I love games, but I was curious about learning about other companies. I think the reason you and I met in the first place is because like you were working on payments. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I want to learn about payments. And then the reason we spent time with you guys, like, oh, like you're a talented guy. Like, yeah, I want to see where you're going. So I always had this curiosity, but over time I started feeling this more and more. I was like, hey, like I love games, but I've dedicated like 13 years of my life to games. And I started like being more and more curious about other stuff. And like I started wanting to spend time like learning other things, right? And then my brother was there, and like he was excited to be CEO of the company, and he wanted to like continue spending all of his time like learning about games, right? And so at one point, I was open with my board. I was like, hey guys, I'm thinking that I own the company should be in a great place, but then I'm gonna think about what's my next adventure. And then Peter was like, hey, like have you thought about venture? And you should spend more time with the other benchmark partners. And as I spent more time, I was like, oh, like, that's so cool, like you meet you meet all these people and like you learn about all these businesses, and then once or twice a year, it feels a little bit like falling in love. Like you, and it feels like when you and I met. You know, it's like, shit, this guy is great. Like I want to spend time with him. I think this is going somewhere. I want to help it go somewhere. And I was like, yeah, like I want to do this.
I know it feels very different, but like describe a little bit like how different it feels to be an investor versus an entrepreneur, right? Like think like, help me like understand how it is to be in your place and being, entrepreneur seat, investor seat, and like how does it materially feel?
Yeah, it's so different. Like the underlying subject is still the same.
Your business.
Yeah, it's companies. And frankly, I think my passion is companies. Like I think companies are the best idea that humans ever had. Like I believe that in that so strongly. And to me, like the biggest evidence of that is there are places in the world that are amazing to live in. Like we're here in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is so amazing. And there are places in the world that suck. It's just so bad living in these places. And the principal difference between these places is the good places have good companies and the bad places don't have good companies. And everything else is that downstream of that. But back to like the difference between me and an investor and an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, like you're still like the subject is still like companies, right? But I guess the main difference is as an entrepreneur, like you become this deep specialist in one thing. And you have one idea, or have like a few ideas, like a small number of ideas, and it takes 10 years to play it out, right? And you're going very deep on that. As an investor, like the thing that you get is like, it's breadth, So I take a couple of pictures a day, and not always, but very frequently, someone comes in and it tells you like a business secret. And it's something that he worked, like he works a long time to learn that thing. Like spend like a couple of years, like he learned the secret, and that's cool. And like and you get
That's a very good way to describe. That's a very interesting way to describe it. Like the cool part about it.
Yeah, it's the coolest part.
It's like books, right? Like someone like studied their whole life and then like condensed it in this like small.
Yeah. The difference is like books, they're out there, so people.
Yeah, this is a secret.
It's a secret.
Yeah,
like no one knows. And sometimes like the secret is so profound that like the meeting ends. Like this probably happens like once a month. Someone tells something. And like it's a story so amazing. Like you're like, I can't believe this person did this thing.
Yeah.
And the secret is so profound that, like a lot of times like I call my brother and it's like, man, there's this company that does this thing that is so cool. And it's like, fuck, I live for this, So that is the part that I love most about the job, is just like learning things that like I don't know how else you could learn them,
What sucks about it?
So there's nothing that really sucks, but in comparison to like starting a company, there's a few things that suck because there's a few things. So for being a founder, man, you build a product and like people are playing with the products and like you decide like what the product does and what it looks, and then like you see it out in the wild. And the thing that I always loved is like you make the product in a certain way because you want people when they play with it to feel a certain way, and then you see people and they play it and they feel it. Like they feel the emotion that you designed them to feel. And that is amazing, right? So like this beautiful products, people use it. So that is amazing. And the other thing is like you have a group of people, right? Your community, your executive team. It's like, hey, like you're this professional sports team where like people are so competent and bought in to like waking up every day and like having this purpose in life. It's like, hey, like we're gonna conquer that hill. And so this feeling of like, hey, we're in these trenches together. So I think these two things of like being an entrepreneur, like that's unbeatable. That's unbeatable. And like you don't have that as an entrepreneur, as an investor. It's like you can give feedback on the product. A lot of times like entrepreneurs choose to ignore it, which is their prerogative. And And like I think Benchmark does better than most at this because we're an equal partnership. So like we're 5 equal partners. So there's a sense of team, but it's different. Like it's a lot of it is also like a lot of the job is an individual sport. So there's a less, it's not the same feeling as, like as I had with my brother
Like
and
community
co-founder.
and team and
So I think, and I miss that part. That part is
But is there, I can't imagine like, is it similar to Learn to Be an Entrepreneur that like is type 2 fun, or it's kind of like a little bit more type 1 fun?
I think this learning of ideas is very type 1 fun. I think this learning is like, I feel so lucky. Yeah. It's like, there's a lot of days where like, you end the day and it's like, I feel so lucky to like just learn these things, to like meet the smart people that have worked so hard to earn this insight. And a lot of times, like they prepare the meeting, right? So it's like, hey, like I have 1 hour with this guy. Like I want to make sure that I'm going to tell my story really well. And it's just like, you feel so lucky to be.
So like if you're like meeting someone that's like graduating from college and you're giving them advice, they're thinking between going to do VC or kind of starting a company, joining a company, or like what do you advise them? Like what was I guess the framework to think about it?
Doing VC out of college feels weird to me because the reality is it's very hard to help an entrepreneur because the way you're set up is like you're investing in great founders. Like the founders are really smart, right? Like if you're doing your job right, like you're gonna invest in people that are smarter than you are. And they're singularly focused in one thing. They spend all their time on that problem. So the likelihood that you're gonna come to him and say, hey, like I'm gonna have an idea that you haven't thought about it is just very unlikely. So like you have less time on the business, you have less context. But there are ways you can help. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the majority of great companies that are created, like they raised venture capital, and the majority of the great companies, they actually raise from great investors, because great investors, they find a way to add value, but that comes from like experience, and like that comes from like having seen stuff, that comes to like having gone through things that the founder hasn't gone, So I think like you and I, we spent a lot of like when you're in your first company and your second company, like we spent a ton of time together, and like you knew a lot more than I did about payments, but I knew a lot more than you did about company building. And so I was able to help you because I had built a larger company than you had. And I could tell, I was like, hey, like when I did this thing, this is what went wrong. And like through your journey and like all the things that you're going, like I was like, hey, like, yeah, when I went through something similar, this is what happened. But imagine like if when you were 16, like imagine if I was like 14. I was like, how could I help you? Like how could I help your business if like I hadn't done it before?
I guess how many of your partners were operators before?
One of my partners was a founder as well, and one like operated for a little bit. And then 2 of them like were always investors. And the reality is like, I think if someone is always an investor, like they can help. And they typically help in a different way. But I think they can help probably like after 10 years. Mm-hmm. Like I think the first 10 years, like you're just learning.
Yeah.
But I think a great investor that has been investing for 10 years, it's like, this thing that I told you about the business secrets that takes your breath away.
Just heard enough of them.
If you've been investing for 10 years, like you heard a lot of them, right?
You can pattern match.
And you can, like as the company is going through something, it's like, hey, like there's all these companies that went through similar things. And then you build, if you've done well, like you build networks of people. And a lot of how you can help is like, oh, you have a problem. Like I know exactly who you should talk to about this problem, right?
Yeah.
But in any ways, I think the case for an inexperienced investor that hasn't operated, I think it's a hard case to make. It's like someone that has choices to like raise from whoever they want. I think it's hard for you to like raise from a person that hasn't operated and hasn't invested before. And the problem is like venture, it's a power law. So if you're not able to invest in the best people, then your returns are going to worse than mediocre, right?
Yeah.
So my advice is like, hey, if someone is like really passionate about, if someone is passionate about investing, I think, hey, like join a hedge fund or like join like an investing house, and then like there's a craft of investing, like you learn it over time. But if you're passionate about venture, I'd say, hey, like get your hands dirty for a little bit, like maybe
go work in a company.
Yeah, like go work for starting a company. I think it's better, but even if you don't start a company, it's like go work for a startup for a little bit, and then you work for a little bit, and then maybe you join a firm and where like you gather some experience, like.
I imagine I remember when you joined Benchmark, one of the things you told me that you thought was hard was that you're meeting all these amazing founders. You're like, oh fuck, I would hire a lot of these guys to to work for a while, right? Like there's so many smart people starting companies, but you only get to like pick one or two a year.
Yeah.
What are, in your view, kind of the most discerning qualities? Like, what are the things that you look for, like they're the most important in your view to differentiate like good from great, Because there's so many good, right? But you need to really pick the great if it's just one to two a year.
Great founders, I think they have these two opposing characteristics that are very hard to find in the same person, which is like great founders, like they tend to be very open-minded, but they tend to be like very disagreeable as well. And you rarely see these two traits in the same person. Because if someone is very open-minded, like you're talking to the person, it's like, oh, like you have a new idea, and it's like, oh, he wants to hear about it, he's like open to it, and it's like, oh, and so it's so nice. It's like it's very nice to talk to people that are open-minded, right? And then the disagreeable part is like, I think great founders, they almost like to disagree. And like they're for sure not bothered by, oh, okay, you have this opinion, I'm gonna go against your opinion, and like that doesn't bother me like at all. Right? That thing, if you're just so comfortable disagreeing with someone, a lot of times that comes with like being more close-minded, right? The people that really strike me as amazing entrepreneurs is like, oh, okay, like I'm curious, I'm very curious, like I really want to understand what you're saying, and then I have no problem like just letting you know that I believe in the opposite.
Dude, we could probably spend another many hours here, but we're kind of running up on time. So thank you so much for spending a couple hours here. I think we could have gone for longer. And, I know you for 12 years, and I feel I know you even more after this couple hours. So I appreciate you making the time to do this with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Victor Lazarte. We'll be back next time with another look inside the minds of the biggest names in business.
HD and HD is produced by me, Henrique in association with Pod People.